If you haven't noticed, housing affordability has deteriorated across the entire developed world. In fact, it's reached crisis levels due to a combination of record house prices and high mortgage rates. So many people on average wages are now getting shut out from home ownership. But what's really worrying and very sinister is that things could be about to get so much worse. I'm Biko Konstantinos, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Some blondes walked into a bar and they were super excited and they were high-fiving each other. And then some more blondes came in and the excitement level went through the roof. Shortly after, they started chanting, 45 days, 45 days. The chanting got louder and louder. 45 days, 45 days, 45 days. And then one more blonde came in carrying something, and when she put it on the table, all the blondes erupted. By this stage, the bartender couldn't contain himself any longer, so he went over to the group of blondes and asked what was going on and what did 45 days mean. So the head blonde said, "We're sick to death of everyone thinking us blondes are dumb. So we proved them wrong. We bought this puzzle and on the box it says 3 to 5 years. But guess what? We finished it in 45 days." Now, if you're a blonde and you were offended at that joke, why don't you subscribe to my channel? And if you have any other hair color, you almost have to subscribe. But seriously, I'd love you to join our community, and I'll always make sure I provide you with independent analysis and commentary. Now, what the heck is going on with housing? And why could this current crisis be part of a very sinister plan? Before COVID, different countries had varying levels of housing affordability, with most places in the US being fairly affordable, but countries like Australia, Canada and New Zealand were getting harder and harder for home buyers, especially those on a low income. But then COVID hit, and since then housing affordability across most developed countries has turned to shit. You see, when COVID hit, every country stimulated the absolute crap out of their economies. They didn't just protect their economies, they poured rocket fuel under them and created a speculative frenzy that turned into the everything bubble. So at that time, investment money was pouring into everything like the stock market, the housing market, and other super risky assets like crypto and NFTs. But eventually these riskier assets started to crash, with many of the smaller crypto altcoins falling around 90% from their peak. Even the stock market fell quite significantly, but not housing. Basically, house prices have gone straight up since COVID, with countries like Australia, Canada, and New Zealand seeing price gains of 30 to 50% in just 2 years. So the countries who had the most expensive housing prior to COVID rose the highest after COVID and have now become just plain ridiculous. Sydney being the perfect example of a speculative play toy where all you need to do is hold a house and you can make millions of dollars in a few years. So we know now that COVID policies have done major damage to the housing market, but was that just countries doing the best that they could during a crisis? Or was it something more sinister? Did every country purposely try to overstimulate their economies, which we now know has led to surging inflation, which has resulted in a global cost of living crisis? Did countries leave their interest rates at 0% far too long, even when it was clear that massive speculative demand had gone into housing? For months and months during 2021, house prices in Australia were going nuts, seeing record rises month after month, and yet the Reserve Bank of Australia kept interest rates at 0% and also kept forecasting that they didn't think rates would rise until 2024. Was this just irresponsible and negligent? Or were policymakers purposely trying to create a housing bubble? Something doesn't add up. Now let's consider how bad housing affordability has gotten around the globe.
When I was your age, I already owned a house. Yeah, because it cost $6. Your down payment couldn't buy a Frosty at an airport Wendy's today. The last time houses were actually affordable was when college degrees were actually useful. Have you doom scrolled Zillow lately? I don't know if that's the price of a house or if the realtor's cat walked across the computer and sat on the zero key. The only way to own a house now is to patiently wait for Mr. Beast to give you one. By the time I was your age, by the time I'm your age, the sun will have exploded. So who needs a house?
So because house prices have risen so high and interest rates have risen so high, we're now at a point where the average income earner can no longer afford to buy their own home. So even if you're in a couple and both of you are earning the average income, in many capital cities, that's still not enough. So here you are, both working full time, which is the majority of your life spent working, and you're not even able to buy your own home somewhere near a major city? I mean, only 30 to 40 years ago, a couple with only one person earning the average wage could easily have afforded their own home. Now, to make things even worse, people who don't own their own home are having to face a rental crisis, where the demand for rentals has gone crazy, sending rent prices through the roof. So you can't afford to buy a home, you can hardly afford to rent, and just try saving for a home deposit where rents and cost of living is through the roof. Now, logically thinking, because housing affordability has deteriorated so badly, most buyers can't afford what sellers are asking for, so you'd expect house prices to start declining. But that hasn't been the case this time. You see, COVID policies has created so much speculation and desperation for housing that even when house prices should be declining, the crazy demand is keeping them near record high levels. And in countries like Australia, Canada, and New Zealand, immigration levels are at all-time highs, ensuring massive demand for housing, which also helps make sure that house prices remain ultra high. Now, are these immigration levels all about bringing in skilled workers, like the governments tell us, or is it being done on purpose for other reasons? Now, we know housing affordability across the globe is currently atrocious, but here is potentially the really sinister part. Inflation has started falling and will most likely continue falling as consumer spending starts to dry up due to the high interest rates. That will most likely lead to central banks cutting their interest rates, and when that happens, because we've still got so much pent-up demand for housing, will we see another boom in house prices, taking them to ever more ridiculous levels and completely out of reach for the majority of workers. This could be the final nail in the coffin for many people who will be pushed out of home ownership forever. So the question is this all part of a global plan to remove home ownership from people? Most of us would have heard talk about the Great Financial Reset, about the World Economic Forum's most infamous vision that you'll own nothing and be happy. Now, so far, property owners have been ecstatic because they've seen ridiculous house price gains, and investors have also seen their rental income increase dramatically. But what if we are seeing a plan to remove home ownership from the population? If that's the case, will policymakers come after property owners as well? Currently, it's mostly been renters and new home buyers who've been suffering. But will that suffering extend to general property owners, or will we start to see housing affordability slowly improve as we return to a more normalized housing market after a few ridiculous crazy years? I'm Biko Konstantinos.